Welcome in, ladies and gentlemen, to the final Road to the Blue Map of the 2022 AHS AA football season. Caleb Brooks, Bo Starkey, Reggie Davis here to break down all the action and all the big matchups going on this week at Jordan-Hare Stadium down in Auburn, Alabama, as we will crown 7 new state champions here for this season. I want to thank our sponsors, Watkins Heating and Cooling LLC, for their sponsorship here of the show. Appreciate them allowing us to be here each and every week. We wouldn't be able to do it without them, as well as Cody Patterson Insurance, Excel, and Buffalo Wild Wings, allowing us to be right here at Buffalo Wild Wings in Gadsden each and every week of the playoffs to break down all of these matchups. Big week ahead as we will head down to Jordan-Hare Stadium on Wednesday, and we'll have flag football getting things kicked off there in the afternoon. Oxford and Auburn will be competing against each other in that game, and then the 7A state championship will get the Super 7 kicked off at 7 p.m. on Wednesday night. A big week ahead of us, and we are pleased to be joined again this week by Ty Hunt, who was right there for all the action 2 weeks ago as Auburn took on Phoenix City. And now we'll be there for all the action at Jordan-Hare Stadium this Wednesday. And Ty, take away all the football stuff, any of that, for Auburn High School. The 2 state championship appearances, both of them have been in Tuscaloosa. How excited is this team, this program, to have the opportunity on Wednesday night to play in the state championship in their hometown at Jordan-Hare Stadium?
He's got it.
Yeah, I think that's huge. Mayor Ron Anders said the same thing. I reiterated that from last week, and he said he was a big part in taking this thing to these 2 schools, and wanted to be there. And I talked to Coach Etheridge early this week, and he told me, he said, "I'm gonna tell you something." He said, "The biggest thing for us going into this game," he said, I sincerely hope, and I think we're going to break an attendance record for high school football championship games this week at Auburn High School."
Wow.
So, that's what we're expecting. And, but it is big because you're not traveling, to go somewhere. So, this is essentially a home game for us. So that's what we're looking forward to.
Yeah, should be huge. And you look back at a couple of years ago, I remember Opelika making it for the first time in 6A and playing against Hoover, and almost the whole entire lower bowl there at Jordan-Hare Stadium was filled up. And it wouldn't surprise me at all. We've seen some of the crowds that Phoenix City and Thompson have brought to Jordan-Hare over the last couple of years. Won't shock me at all to see that same type of crowd. But knowing that, as the coaching staff this week, how much is the responsibility on the coaches to make sure that this team doesn't let all that, the emotions and all that, get the best of them and then go out there and not play Auburn High School's brand of football?
Yeah, and I've said this before, a lot with Auburn University, and same, it's any level of football. Emotion's going to carry you only so far. Emotion's going to carry you maybe a quarter. These kids have played a lot of big games. They played a state championship game 2 seasons ago. They've played semifinal games the last 4 or 5 seasons. We played Hoover in the Crampton Bowl and the Champions Classic this year. So I really expect after a drive, maybe 2, these emotions are going to settle down, and it's going to be hard-nosed Auburn High School football.
Obviously, these 2 teams both played against Hoover this year. Thompson played Hoover twice. When you look at the 2 games, obviously Thompson gets beat in the first game 9-0 by Hoover. We see the Hoover defense show up. 2 weeks ago, they dominate this Hoover team. They slice through them on offense. Obviously played really, really well. Compare those 2 games and then also compare the same Hoover team that Auburn saw first game of the year and where they improved and the kind of team that Thompson saw the last couple of weeks when they played them.
Yeah, we played Hoover first game of the season, and we had not really found our identity yet. We had a lot of questions in that first game. And still we rushed for, I think D.V. Williams, our starting running back, he ran for almost 200 yards that game. Had a big game. We had a couple mishaps. We had some drops and things like that. It took some points off the board. And again, Hoover's defense was really, really good, but our defense at Auburn was really good too. Hoover only crossed the 50, I think, 1 time in the second half. One of their touchdowns came on a block punt. that hurt. So I feel like the 17-14, it was not really indicative of what we could have done that game. But Thompson, I've watched film all week. In this last game, I think Thompson just totally dominated. Five takeaways on that defense, and one of them been a pick six by New Boy Fagans, and that's that just shows how much Thompson had grown in 4 or 5 weeks since playing Hoover the first time. And man, they're so well coached. I mean, they're an epitome of 7A football in Alabama and really nationwide. We see them play all these teams from everywhere. I mean, they're really, really good. And not to take away from Hoover, but Thompson is just, that's where everybody strives to be. And I think it's gonna be a good game. We're ready for it.
Obviously, the front for Thompson is what a lot of people are going to talk about. I mean, Peter Woods is a big name, but it's not just him. They have a lot of other guys that surround him that are really good. Their middle linebackers play really well. And then you've already mentioned one of them. You got Fagans in the secondary. You got Tony Mitchell as well, who are 5 stars and going to play in Alabama. And where can you attack a team like this offensively that has so much depth and so much talent at all 3 levels of the defense like this?
Yeah, Auburn does have, I mean, Thompson does have the best defense we've seen all year. Front, linebackers, DBs, everybody. I think we can't rely on just making big plays. It's going to have to be, it's going to have to be just the grinded out type of football games that we want to play. That's the football that we like to play. We like to play good, hard-nosed, dirty football, just get down there and grind it out. And, our offensive line, and I don't care who knows it. I mean, I think Auburn's offensive line is maybe the best in the state of Alabama right now. Yep. Led by Braden Joyner.
I agree.
You've got other guys out there that are great, and Clyde Pittman at quarterback. I mean, Coach Wagner he calls, like everybody, we call a lot of RPO stuff, and Coach Wagner is going to give Clyde the responsibility and the accountability to say, hey, if the play needs to be changed, you can change it out there, and he knows it well enough to do it. And so there's really, to answer your question, there's not a good place to attack these guys. We're going to line up, and hopefully we can play our style of football, and that's where you get behind with guys like this. And Central Phoenix is, they do something, we got to protect the football and just be able to play Auburn football. At any point, if we have to get away from our game plan, it could be trouble for us.
But we've heard a lot about now this Auburn team. Tell us a little bit about this Thompson group who, look, they dropped the first 2 games of the year, and everybody started kind of questioning this Thompson group. Oh, this team's not good enough. This team's not like the past teams. Somebody else from the north is going to make it. And all they've done since then is just go 10-1 and for the most part, dominate a lot of their opponents. So tell us a little bit about this team and how you feel like they're going to be attacking Auburn on Wednesday night.
The part that really scared me about those first 2 losses, that didn't bother me so much, is how they were playing in 7A Region 3. They were kind of, and you and I both said, they were kind of showing chinks in the armor, sleepwalking through. And I remember being in preseason out there with Coach Freeman, watching them practice. And Coach Freeman, after the game, or after practice, sat down for 15 minutes and talked to his guys about they didn't look good, their body language wasn't good, their practice, their effort wasn't there. They're the hunted this year. They're not going to be handed a championship this year. There's some legitimate teams that can knock them off, and did during the regular season. Now, I want to go throw something at you. Mark Freeman, they have won 3 straight 7A state titles. They were second in the nation 2 years ago. And a miracle win against this same Auburn team that made national headlines, if not worldwide headlines. But even though their defense, I think, is still on par with that team, their offense definitely is not, in my opinion. You're starting an 8th grader right here. Trent Seaburn is in 8th grade. He's an 8th grader. He's taking care of the football is why he is the starter now. He's 92 for 133 for 988 yards, 10 touchdowns to only 2 picks, where his counterpart was throwing multiple picks a game, which they cannot do in that offense. They want to give the ball to A.J. Green, muddy this thing up, let him get on the ground, let their defense roll, let their defense handle the field position against Auburn. A.J. Green's at over 1,000 yards now and 15 touchdowns on the year. And you said it best. We switch this thing over to their defense, which y'all both have mentioned. I don't have to reiterate everything you guys have said. It's the best offensive line versus arguably the best defensive line in the state of Alabama. So there's no mystery who's going to win this football game. Who wins that matchup right there? But in Thompson's behalf, they go 3 levels deep with superstars. Right? Peter Wood, superstar, defensive tackle. 83 tackles, 23 of those are for loss on the year. When you get into the linebacking core, you got Seth Hampton. He's got 93 tackles, 16 of those tackles are for loss. And then the most star-studded group of all is their secondary when you have a 5-star and a top 5 player in the nation, and Boy Fagans, who's only a sophomore, and a 5-star Alabama commit, Tony Mitchell. When you look at Mitchell's stats, you're like, why is he a 5-star? He's only got like 30 tackles because nobody's stupid enough to throw it.
Nobody goes after him. Yeah.
They're not stupid. That's why he's got 5. That's also why New Boy's got so many pick sixes and housed them. So on their end, their defense is there. I don't think their offense is there. This game's going to get very interesting. I'm going to kick it to Reggie or whoever you want to go.
Yeah, no, I mean, Reggie, tell us your thoughts on this matchup and, really, where's Auburn going to have to attack Thompson and where's Thompson going to have to attack this Auburn team in order to have success?
I think what Auburn's going to have to do, they're going to have to keep the Thompson offense off the field and maybe try to wear their defense down. And with the way Coach Etheridge coaches his teams, I think they can do that. One thing about Coach Etheridge, and, people talk about Paul Benefield, Mark Freeman, and Terry Curtis being like some of the top coaches in the state of Alabama. But Coach Etheridge has 5 state championships to his name and going for number 6 this week. And he has an overall record of 172 and 56. And he's 45-13 in the playoffs. So he's been there. He's been in this position before. He knows how to win. He knows what it takes to get to that next level. And I think Auburn will have they'll be ready for Thompson.
I want to ask you two this. Coach Etheridge, if he wins this, 6 state championships, obviously won a lot at 4A, won at 6A, this would be one at 7A. Where does this now put him in the conversation when it comes to top coaches in the state of Alabama, if he's able to pull this one off and defeat Coach Mark Freeman?
Our man Josh behind the camera is saying that he'll be number 2.
Who's
if I had to
number 1?
guess, Josh is going to say number 1 is going to be Danny Horn.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I would definitely put Coach Etheridge in that conversation with those guys. He's a
top
lot
5 no matter what.
Yeah, he's top 5, definitely
He's Hall
top
of Fame.
5.
He's a Hall of Fame coach. And
Yeah,
so is
he's
Mark
going to be a
Freeman.
Hall of Fame coach, no doubt. I mean, 5 state championships and he's going for number 6. I mean, how can you not put him in the top 5?
Yeah, John.
Big
State
E?
championships? There's 3 guys with 8 right now. Interesting stat, though. And I shared this stat with with Ty earlier this season. As good as Coach Etheridge is, remember the stat I showed you about Coach Benefield?
Yep.
He would have to win 120 something in a row without losing to tie his percentage winning record. But I mentioned that to Coach Benefield, and Coach Benefield laughed at me, and he goes, "Don't you think he's played a little bit tougher competition than I have?"
And I've had some people before, they would, from smaller schools and stuff, like when we were at Oxford, and they would say, Etheridge wouldn't play us. I said, that's not true. Because when he was at Oxford, he signed up to play Thompson. And the next week he signed up to play Pleasant Grove.
Yep.
And then he played IMG last year at Auburn. I promise you, if Nick Saban wanted to roll down there, he may know the result, but he is not going to back down.
That's
that
right.
man. But again, he's got great coaches. He's got Coach Wagner, which is my brother-in-law, and I'm always going to give him the praise because he does extremely well. But a lot of stuff. Auburn had the highest scoring offense in the state this year. But a lot of people, you can't overlook that defense.
No,
Scott Goolsby at Auburn High, that defense is ridiculous.
Yeah, you're exactly right. I think Auburn High will give Nick Saban and Alabama a run for their money this year.
Hey,
I'm totally kidding on that.
You talk about how good this Thompson defense is, obviously. What defense would you compare that Auburn saw within the region that would be as close to what this Thompson defense is?
Yeah, I think the only one that can be even remotely comparable is Central Phoenix City. Central Phoenix City's got an all-star on the defensive end. They've got a couple guys in the secondary that are, they've got 4 or 5 guys that are going to the SEC on their defense. But again, we struggled with them. We scored 14 points in a win, and that's what we expect this game. We expect this game to be low scoring, hard nosed, and the only guarantee I can give you is that Auburn High School, our football players will play 100% on every single play. I promise you, there's no quit in any kid on that team.
You know, that's the thing with Coach Etheridge. It seems like wherever he coaches, those guys will run through a brick wall for him. And the people around him, his coaches, the parents and the fans, they absolutely love him.
It's
and
insane.
The first time I met him, I was like, I like this guy. You know, I became a fan right away.
Yeah. Now, he's easy to love. That's right.
Yeah.
Ty, what are your biggest keys for both Auburn and for Thompson in this game on Wednesday night? What are both teams going to have to do in order to give themselves an opportunity to win this game?
I think this game, whoever takes it will just have to, turnovers, mistakes, that's part of football. But it is literally going to be holding the football and just minimizing any negative plays. Because with these two defenses on the field, if you get in third and more than 7 or 8, it's your percentage of converting is going to be very, very low. So I think staying ahead of the chains and getting in second and short and third and short early will be the keys to the ball game.
Ty, I appreciate you coming on and joining us, breaking down 7A real quick. Tell everybody out there about Excel and what you guys do there with Excel.
I want to hear about Excel.
Yeah, so at Excel, we're an independent contractor that just sells stuff to people, maybe guys that don't have the funds or the means necessary to hire a full-time sales rep. That's where me and my company, we step in and you bring us a product and we take it to the market and we're going to sell it for you and we're going to market it better than anybody else you have. Like we've got a proven track record of success and that track record is not going anywhere anytime soon.
Good deal. Ty, appreciate you taking the time to join us. Appreciate Excel and their support here for Road to the Blue Mat. We're going to take a quick break. When we come back, we will get into breaking down some of the other matchups on Thursday and Friday. Coming up this week for the AHSA Super 7 right here on Average Joe Sports Talk.
Whether it's ice cream Hey, we'll start with 6 and then go to 4. Is that good?
Start with 6 and go to 4.
Welcome back in. Road to the Blue Mat Super 7 edition as we get set for all of the matchups going on at Jordan-Hare Stadium this week in Auburn, Alabama, as we will crown 7 new state champions here in the AHS AA. Again, want to thank our sponsors, Watkins Heating and Cooling, for allowing us to be here each and every week and being the main sponsor here of this show. Each and every week we are brought to you by Watkins Heating and Cooling. So look, it's that time of year, air's fluctuating, your air conditioning, heating, all of that is going to need some maintenance. So make sure to call Watkins Heating and Cooling. Also want to thank Cody Patterson Insurance, Excel, and Buffalo Wild Wings as well for sponsoring the show and allowing us to bring you all these games throughout this whole entire AHS AA playoffs. Caleb Brooks, Bo Starkey, Reggie Davis now joined by Coach Matt Glover from Etowah High School. And Coach, before we get into talking about these games, this was year one for you at Etowah this year. You come over from Clay Chalkville. Just kind of give me your thoughts on what this year was like for you, making that move over, taking over at Etowah, and how you felt about what you and your group were able to accomplish this season.
I was pleased with the way our kids responded to a different coaching style. It was different for them. I'm different for them. I thought we had the kids bought in. We played really well. Had a bad quarter against Destra, but if some bucks for candy and nuts, we'd all have a Merry Christmas, that type deal. But good thing about it is I was able to see what I think we need to address, what we need to fix going forward. Like I told you, this isn't a sprint, this is a marathon. So hopefully I'm here for the long run and get this thing turned around and y'all be up here talking about us next year, a couple years, instead of me talking about somebody else. That's my goal. So, really, I was, and like I said, like I told everybody, it's a great community, love football, great support. They gave you every opportunity to be successful. We just got to do our part. So.
Coach, looking at now the action for this week, games we're going to break down with you is the 6A games, the 4A games, and looking at 6A, starting off with that. You were in 6A last year, obviously won the 6A state championship there at Clay Chalkville, and now looking at it this year, Mountain Brook, Saraland going to be facing off. You guys knocked Mountain Brook out in the semifinals in a very hard-fought game last year. A lot of people felt like they were a group that could come back and have an opportunity to get here. Obviously, everybody in 6A is fortunate that Clay Chalkville fell in round number one and wasn't able to advance further. But for Mountain Brook, finally getting over that hump now and getting into this championship game, obviously a huge thing for Coach Yeager and his group, but going to be running into a team that has a ton of athletes and has a really special athlete that is starting to take over games at the wide receiver position and carrying the ball each time. So tell us your thoughts on this matchup and how you see this game kind of going on Friday night when these two teams face off at Jordan-Hare.
I haven't watched Saraland. I know Coach Kelly's a great coach. I'm familiar with Coach Fancher, the O-line guy who's at Gardendale for a while. I am very familiar with Mountain Brook over the last 2 years. I've spent, I feel like, half of my life watching film on it. And one thing about them is they're not going to be intimidated by the situation. They've been playing the Hoovers and the Thompsons every year. I think this is kind of a monkey off the back of Coach Yeager. All the respect in the world for him. He does a good job with stuff other than football that people don't know. The culture they build there. I think it's going to be. I think it's the best matchup in the playoffs. I really do. I know 7A is going to be really good with Coach Ted, Coach Freeman, but this two, like if you have never, I just know as being a DC playing Mountain Brook, or an OC playing Mountain Brook now, what they do, it's like stuff you don't see. And the problem with what they do is not so much how do you defend it or how do you attack it, it's how do you get your scout team to duplicate what they do. We spent last year, the last 2 years we played them, we spent probably 20 minutes a day just working on their shifts and trying to teach our guys how to count. How to count numbers and know when you got to shift, when you don't have to shift. Theirs, man, he does such a good job of trying to outsmart you. Most of the time he does because he's a brilliant dude, and he's really, really smart. And their quarterback and their punter are the same number. So there's a reason the quarterback and the punter are the same number. we had to teach our guys last year, don't cover receivers with knee braces on. You know, just little stuff like that is like, they do just such a good job. And they're going to be, you know, sound, and it's going to be a really good game.
When you look at their program, you know, you kind of talked about this huge monkey off Coach Yeager's back, and when you do finally make it the way that they have after they've been so close, you know, they were playing in the toughest region possible at 7A. They moved down to 6A, and they kept just running into somebody, and it was you guys for 2 years. How, you know, sometimes when you go into a game like this, can a team like Mountain Brook play even more free now that they've kind of gotten over that hump and finally gotten into the state championship?
You know, I think they can. I really do, because, you know, Pimpson beat them 2 years ago in the semis. We were lucky enough last year to beat them in the semis, so now they're there. You know, it's almost like the Braves back in the, you know, they you know, so. That's a good point. And it's going to be, you know, I don't know, is this Saraland? I'm not sure how many times has Saraland been there, you know.
It's the third, fourth.
Yeah, so it's, and the good thing about Saraland, I think they got going, is they got a week to prepare for them. So now, if this game was played on Thursday, you know, short week, it might be a little different. Because I'm telling you, like, fellas, they run so much stuff, and they don't run a lot of plays. It's just what they give you, the eye candy they give you with it. And then defensively, there is, you know, with Pop, who's at this stadium now, I think they're still doing the same type of stuff. I would watch them defensively and try to help our offensive guys out. Hey, this is what they're trying to do. And it's like, to be honest with you, I don't know what they're doing. You know, the only thing I can tell you is what covers are in, depending on where their safeties are at. And after that, you know, it's on you on your own. So, you know, because it was like, it's a madness type deal, but it's not. They know what they're doing. Their kids, and another thing is, their kids are so smart. You know, I mean, like, they're so smart. They come from a great, you know, home life where they're expected to be successful. And I saw a thing the other day Coach Yeager does on Thursdays where they brought all the dads in and had like a little meal for them on Thursdays after practice. You know, it's just it's a different place with great coaches, really, really good coaches. The quarterback coach there now was our quarterback coach at Clay last year, really great guy. So that's what I was telling my wife. I said, that Joker's been in 4 state championships in 4 years and been coaching like 8 years. You know, I'm like, so, but you know, it should be a really good game.
You know, you guys went through it last year. How much do you have to talk to your team throughout the week about this is going to be different? You're at Jordan-Hare. There's a big video board there. There's all this different stuff that you don't normally have to deal with. And, you know, I mean, Mountain Brook has a video board, but it ain't as big as this one at Jordan-Hare. It's not going to be the type of atmosphere that you're in where, you know, I mean, you know from being there, the sound stays in because of how the upper decks and stuff are. So how much during the week do you have to talk to your guys about how to prepare for the environment and to not let all of that type of stuff affect your emotions and the way that you treat going into the game?
To be honest with you, we really didn't treat it. We treated it like a regular game, because I think if you make too much of a big deal out of it, the kids get a little uptight. The big problem we had was it wasn't so much, which I'm in the box, so it was kind of hard for me to tell the crowd how loud it was, but you know, yeah. So, but the big thing we had was like the depth perception on the sidelines. So, like for example, our safety couldn't get the signals because the sidelines were so wide, and he didn't wear his contacts the first half. But anyway, it was so that was the big deal for us, was just, you know, not being able to go on the field and walk the field, because, you know, they said nobody could walk the field except for, but Thompson was able to walk the field. You know, we'll go. That's a different story. So we wasn't able to. And then you get there and like they rush you on the field, especially 6A game. Like 4A got done, they did the presentation, we got on the field, and I'm telling you, it's like 10 minutes later, we're playing a football game. We ain't got time to warm up, time to do anything. And like, that was a little different. Like, I barely made it to the box. You know, I had to, you know, so I felt like I was going to Graymont Avenue, the old great lady, as far as I had to walk to get up there. But, so that was there's little things like that. And then I would hate, you know, like another thing as a coach, the logistics of it is taking a team to a different place, staying in a different place the night before, sleeping in a different bed. Now, Yeah, I know with some of the guys that I've coached, it'll be a little different. Mountain Brook might be a little different. You know, it might be as big for them, but there's a lot of things other than, and you don't know all the other, like the stuff that goes on besides the game, as in all of what's asked for you by the state. Like, we need you to do this, we need you to do this, you know, hey, can I get tickets to the game? Can we get boxed? You know, just stuff like that. So, I mean, and, you know, like I said, it was a special deal last year, but for us, it wasn't that big, a huge of a deal because it was a regular bus ride, you know, so, but I know I'm sure they're going to talk about how loud it's going to be, but really in a stadium that big, you know, the crowd noise I don't think will get affected as bad, so.
Well, now looking at this matchup here, Bo, tell us a little bit about this Saraland team and you know what you've kind of noticed in breaking them down, looking at their stuff, their numbers, and what really stands out to you about what this team is capable of going into this matchup on Friday night with Mountain Brook.
Well, in all my years of doing interviews with Average Joes, before I start talking about Saraland, the number one interview I think I've ever done was with Chris Yeager. He might be the smartest human being I've ever sat down and talked with. And coincidentally, probably the second one may have been Bucky McMillan in the same school. Kudos to Benny Eves for having those two guys on that staff over there or at that school. Because what Coach Glover just said, all that's true, but he's going to need to do all that because these numbers I'm about to throw up at you, and anytime a team can run and throw and you got a good quarterback, they're dangerous to defend. This team's averaging 43.4 points per game, Saraland is. Their quarterback, KJ Lacey, listen to these numbers. Coach Glover's a defensive guy. If you were facing a guy like this, Coach, let me ask you how you feel about this. This quarterback is 188 for 292, 3,046 yards, 39 touchdowns to only 6 picks.
We could probably find a place for him to play somewhere. But you know what, Bo? Like you getting the point total. We were averaging that last year when we played them.
Oh, I remember.
And so like it was.
I remember.
You know, but like it's. And I know Coach Kelly's a quarterback guy. You know what I'm saying? Like, and you can coach those cats up all week long, but it's different when you got live bullets shooting.
That's different.
And they're lining up here, and the next snap, you know, the 3 technique on this side becomes a 9 technique on this side, and they're. You know, but now with that being said, you know, Coach Fancher, O-line coach, was at Gardner head coach forever. For a while, I mean, I've known him, really great guy. So, and he's played Mountain Brook. So like, he was in the regional at Mountain Brook. He's kind of, there's some familiarity there with him. So.
He's probably the most popular guy in film study this week down there.
Yeah, because he's got some, you know, some experience playing against him.
That was one of the 3 trifectas I wanted to mention. Here's the other 2. Sante McWilliams, their tailback. So you got a quarterback that's doing that. Listen what their tailback's doing. 226 carries, 1,325 yards, and 15 touchdowns. Then when he does release that football and he's throwing it downfield, you have an Alabama commit receiving it. Ryan Williams, Alabama commit. 80 receptions, 1,557 yards, averaging 19.5 yards per touch. 23 touchdowns. Oh, by the way, they will motion him into the backfield where he has 44 carries. Do the math on this one for 521 yards, which is over 10 yards a touch, and 12 touchdowns. They have scored 607 points in 14 games this year.
Sounds like to me their O-line's pretty good too.
Yes.
You know, I mean, you got athletes,
Absolutely.
but also your O-line's pretty good.
Because if they didn't have an offensive line that was performing, none of this would be possible.
And you know that's something I think that goes unnoticed, especially when you get in these games. You look at all the stars and and your D-line, your stud D-linemen's get noticed. You know, but when it comes to those O-lines, usually, you know, whoever has the best O-line, and I know this is coach speak, but. Don't turn the football over.
That's true.
Don't give their team, you know, my thing, I tell our kids that for every game, in every offensive possession with the kid, if we do that, we got a chance.
That's true.
Reggie, tell us a little bit about Mountain Brook. Who are some of their standout guys and some of the guys that, you know, we're going to be looking at to be making plays for Mountain Brook in this game on Friday night?
Cole Gamble. I mean,
Was that number 19?
That is number 19, I do believe. He is the kid's, I know I said this last week, but he is the real deal. He is hard to take down. If you don't tackle him early, you let him get free, 6 points all day. And his running style is what gets me, because like when he throws that head back and sticks that chest out, he's gone. You know, he's going to be hard to bring
He looks
down.
kind of Forrest Gumpish.
He does have that Forrest Gump kind of run. I do want to shout out to Brian Lucas from Mountain Brook. I've noticed he is in watching us tonight. But last week against Muscle Shoals, Cole Gamble had 24 carries and 193 yards, 3 touchdowns. And so far in the playoffs, he's scored 17 touchdowns in the playoffs. Unreal. And through 4 rounds, the kid has scored 17 touchdowns. I mean, for him, this is just another day at the office. You know, that's what he does. And then, you know, Mountain Brook is real heavy on running the ball, but they can throw the ball some. John Colvin was 9 of 15 last week with 148 yards. And one of his main targets is Clark Sanderson. And he had 5 receptions last week for 84 yards. And, you know, like I said, Mountain Brook is very run heavy. They had 418 total yards last week, and of that, 267 was rushing. So it's no secret what Mountain Brook's going to come out and do. So my question is, are they going to use that to their advantage and try to keep that Saraland offense off the field and just, you know, pound the ball all night? And because when you keep those guys off the field, you have a better chance of really putting that game, you know, winning that game. So that's my take on that one.
Coach, you know, you mentioned Mountain Brook, how much motion they do, the way they move guys around. What does that make you have to do on defense? Like, how much of your base defense were you able to run against them when you guys played them last year?
0. I mean, seriously, like, it makes you can't do what we did, because you can't, because I'm a blitzing style guy, and so sometimes you can blitz yourself out of this stuff. So we kind of looked at it on Saturday and Sunday and kind of saw what they did and kind of put in something that they hadn't seen us do that was effective. But it just takes you, I mean, it takes you totally out of, like, because I mean, like, and I don't know what they, like I said, I haven't watched any film on them, like, studied them, but they used to have where all their O-linemen could snap. So, like, they would shift and your right tackle would now be the center and everybody else be on the left side and all your receivers are over here. So you got 4 eligible dudes with the line over there still running the ball. So it's a nightmare. I mean, and the other thing you have to do is your kids have to be so disciplined against them. You know, 2 years ago we played them in the 3rd round and they did a deal where they would shift on like 4th down and short and run everybody off the field and run the punt team on. Well, we had worked on it because we knew the key with when they were going to do it. We worked on it all week long, every day. Well, it came nut cutting time, and guess what? They did it, and we jumped. And so automatic first down. And I don't care, you know, like I said, you just got to be disciplined. And so I think that's the key against them, just be very disciplined.
Shifting gears now, we're going to look over into 4A, the classification that you were in this year, Coach, and a team that you're very familiar with, Cherokee County, going to be taking on Andalusia. Huge win for Cherokee County over Aniana to get into the state championship game this week. Tell us about this Cherokee County team and what makes them a group that has found themselves now playing for 4A state championship this week.
You know, I think I think they finally figured out their identity offensively when they played us, unfortunately. Their quarterback got hurt in the first half against us, and they came out I guess it was about 6 minutes ago in the 2nd quarter, and they came out and lined up in their too tight wildcat double sniffer and just said, "Here we come, stop us." And they threw the ball one time the rest of the game. And then I think that was, and they had done it previously early in the year, but it was kind of a short yardage type deal, you know. But when they started doing that and figured out, hey, we're pretty good with 9, and like I said, I'm not good with kids' names, I just know numbers. And when they had 9 and 1 in the backfield, and then they got those big old linemen out there being physical, that's when I think they got really good. And you look at them last week. I watched the Indiana game. I didn't go to it. I sat at the house and cried and watched it as I was just thinking, what if, you know? But, I wasn't going to watch it. My wife goes, I kept checking the score, and she was like, "How we just go and put it on?" I said, "Yes." So I was trying to keep up with them and keep up with Mark at Coosa and my buddy over in Mississippi. He's playing Mississippi, and so. But when they got in that and just started doing that and running at Indiana, you know, I think that makes that's kind of their identity. You know, I think that's coach's identity. That's their identity, and I think that's when they finally figured out, hey, we're pretty good at this, and they got, you know, they've done a really good job. I think that's all the stat were. I think Nine's got like you were talking about, Bill. I think he's got like. How many 1,800 yards in the playoffs?
1,141 yards and 15 touchdowns
in 4 games.
Playoffs.
You know, and then one back there. You know, he don't. You know, when I first saw him out there, he had 2 picks against us, a pick 6. He had a 100-something yard touchdown return the other day. He got called back. So that's those guys. Those cats are dynamic back there.
Yeah.
You know, Bo, you got to see the Andalusia team play against Montgomery Catholic earlier in the year, and after seeing them, you know, he's talked about Cherokee County and how they want to line up, run the football, but how much does that also kind of play into this Andalusia team's hands a little bit and to what they like to do on the defensive side of the ball?
Reggie's going to have the ultimate breakdown for him, but I did get to see him live, so I appreciate you asking me. Andalusia, that's what they want. They want a muddy game. They want to be physical. They want the point of attack. They want it on both sides. They don't just want it on offense. They just don't want it on defense. They want it on offense. If you go back and watch the first Catholic Montgomery game, Jeremiah Cobb was negative yards rushing moments before the halftime when they went 5 wides and they flipped it to him on an end around where he ultimately got 10 yards. To that moment, he was probably negative 5 yards on like 5 carries. They were killing him up front. And they eventually wore him down and won that football game. So they want that. But here's the deal with them, and they showed me, they proved me wrong. I didn't think they was going to get past Anniston. Because everything that they do, Anniston does. And on the back end, Anniston had better athletes, I thought. What I didn't account for was the turnovers. Anniston got up on them 21-0 at halftime. They withstood, which means they've gotten in better shape. Because I think that Catholic game, they had a soul searching after that game about not giving up. But in their players' defense, they ain't played past halftime in no game that year. They've been up 30 or 40 every game. So now they're in a 4-quarter game with superb athletes, and they lost it, which I think is a blessing, because had they won that one, they might have lost this one. That's the way I look at it. But I'll kick it over to Reggie with the Andalusia breakdown.
Yeah, I mean, Reggie, tell us about this Andalusia team. Obviously, a big deal down there for them, finally getting over the hump, making the state championship game. You know, they're in a similar boat to Mountain Brook, where they've been right here in the semifinals year after year. They kept running into a UMS or somebody like that would knock them out. They finally get the big win over Catholic last week and get in. So tell us a little bit about this Andalusia team and the way they're going to attack Cherokee County.
Well, looking at their game last week, it seems like they're going to run the ball a lot. So I think they're going to counter Cherokee County being able to run the ball with their own guys running it. Jamarian Burnett, which is their 4-star recruit, he is out. And so in his place, Dorian Crittenden, so tried to say that fast 3 times. He had 45 carries last week for 216 yards and 2 touchdowns. 45 carries. I had to check that twice. Yeah, 45 carries. So they're going to run the ball. So there's no secret what they're going to do. So I think this is going to be an old school, old-fashioned, we're going to run it down your throat type football game on both sides of the ball. It's going to be interesting to see how this game is going to play out. This is one I'm definitely going to make sure I watch. And one of the things for Andalusia to do that, and I think you talked about that earlier, Bo, is their offensive line is going to be key. And for him to have 45 carries, their O-line played some really good football. And that's where you win ball games, is up front. That's where it all starts. And those guys, they don't get enough credit. That's just with anybody. They don't get enough credit for the job that they do, because it starts and stops with those guys. And I think that's going to be key in this game. I haven't seen Andalusia. I don't know As far as size goes, I'm not sure how big they are compared to Cherokee County, but it's going to come down to the O-line play in this game.
Yeah, and Coach, Bo's showing you a picture of their offensive line right now. We know it's no secret. Andalusia's going to want to line up and run the ball. They found some success in the passing game against Anniston, and that's how they were able to defeat them. But after you've seen Cherokee County on defense, how are they going to be able to hold up to Andalusia lining up and being willing to hand the ball off and run it 50 times in a ball game?
No, I actually watched, because I didn't want to come in here and sound like a DA when I was talking to y'all about Andalusia, but I actually watched Andalusia Montgomery Catholic today on film. And if that's their backup running back, because I heard Coach at halftime say that I guess the starter was out with concussion.
Yeah.
So if he's back and that's their backup,
It's 2 and 9, both of them is dogs.
Yeah.
they threw the ball. I thought they threw the ball really well. The quarterback was, had some athletes out there. If I was playing Cherokee County, I wouldn't do what they do. You know what I'm saying? Like, if I had to play them again, like the success we had against them, we did have a little success, was able to, play action, a little pass against them. But now we didn't have the O-line they got either, the size-wise. So, it's. I mean, I'm sure that they probably have a little bit more stars or players than Cherokee County's got. But man, those Cherokee County's they're playing really well right now, and they, I don't know. A mind's a deadly thing, and if the best athletes win the game every time, then probably a lot of I thought Anniston was as good a looking as high school football team before I had seen in a long, long time. And then looking at Montgomery Catholic, they looked the same way. And I looked at Andalusia and I was like, I would love to be in Auburn, but that's going to be compared getting ready for these cats because they're a good looking group. So, and I know it always says this, but it always comes down to early success and getting ahead and not making mistakes, that type of stuff. So.
Bo, like Coach said, Cherokee County is playing really well right now. Talk a little bit about them and this run that they've been on in the playoffs and the way that they've been able to do it through these first 4 rounds.
It's going to be short and sweet. Just all I circled this word, wow. Because I met Coach Kelly when he first got the job up there, and we talked to him, and he had this vision. He had this vision that envisioned new weight room, new locker room, new turf, and I was sitting there like, but when you're sitting out there and you're looking at all that, you're like, I've seen so many new age hot shot coaches, and look at this, check mark, check mark, check mark, and he said we're going to play for a state championship, check mark. When you see it come to fruition, you're like, man, that's kind of crazy. He was sitting there telling me this years ago, like 2 years ago, 2.5 years ago when I met him. Mm-hmm. I didn't doubt him, but I've also heard that same smoke, so to speak, from several coaches and it not happen. But let me tell you a little bit about why it happened. Brad Weaver, who I have circled right here, offensive line coach, never wavered, a graduate from there. He has heart, he cares about the program. And Matt talked about their offensive line. They may not be the star power of some of these other offensive lines, but they play hard and they play with grit. And Matt talked about it against Etowah, who's salty on defense. Talked about lining up 2 tights, and then you better take the man at his word. Brad Weaver does an outstanding job for them. But let me tell you something. He allows what I'm about to happen. Let me throw this at you. We mentioned this earlier. Jacob Cornejo, 1,141 yards and 15 touchdowns in 4 games. And he didn't play a second half of one of those games. Not a snap in the second half of one of those games. Last week in the semifinal game, you ready for this? 312 yards, and he averaged 10.8 yards per touch. Cade Hopper, who I've said is the catalyst, the leader of the team, who got hurt against Matt and them. But he's the guy who gets everybody lined up. He is averaging about 75% on his passes this year. He was 3 for 5 for 101 yards last week. By the way, all 3 of those receptions went to one person, which was Kid Lightning, Jack Amos. 3 receptions, 101 yards. Do the math on that per touch. Not to mention his 2 touchdowns he had rushing. They're dangerous. They're good. He mentioned about their defense as well. Tay Diamond, who is their second team or third team running back, second team tailback. Amos gets a lot of carries, but he's not a tailback, so to speak, quote unquote. He's unbelievable at defense, though. Tay Diamond sets the edge. He's only a sophomore. Last week he had an outstanding game against Aniana. Their defense is pretty salty as well. I hate to tell everybody this. Everybody thinks Andalusia's going to kill them. That's not going to happen. It's not going to happen.
I know at the beginning of the year, John Holder came out with his predictions, and
That's
I'm
true.
not going to lie. He had Cherokee County
He did.
playing for the state championship this year, and no disrespect, John, I laughed, and I was like, nah, maybe another year or two, but I did not see it this year. John was spot on.
It was. I give him that.
Yeah.
Coach, what are your biggest keys for both sides? You know, you talked about you watched a little bit of Andalusia. You obviously saw Cherokee County up close. What are the big keys for both of these teams to find a way to go and win a state championship?
You know, I think it all starts with number one, who tackles the best. Can Cherokee County tackle their athletes in space? And how much pounding can you take? You know, like Bo was talking about Brad Weaver. I actually coached Brad when I was at Cherokee County. So there's you know, and I don't know the guys from Andalusia. I know that I coached with a guy who coached there, and I think they're a lot similar in the communities. But coaching in Center Alabama and knowing how important football is up there, man, you know, like you could go probably Friday morning or what day they play Friday morning. You probably go up there and rob everything in Center and get away with it. So, you know, I think it's you know.
We're good.
I know it always goes back to this, but tackling, blocking, and no turnovers. And that's pretty much key for any game, you know, and special teams. You know, you look back, 2 years ago, I know that, you know, 3 years ago, Auburn, special teams, you know, Freeman don't have 3 state championships without special teams. So that can be a catalyst, you know, for your team. And that's something I think that nobody up here has talked about, and I've heard, like, how good is their kicking game? Well, I know Cherokee County's got Gus the kicking mule. He kicked that thing out the back of the end zone, and he kicks it really well. So, and y'all probably too young to remember Gus the kicking mule, the Disney movie. Yeah. Anyway, but anyway, so I think that's special teams and blocking and tackling. It goes back to what you start working in spring training, and it carries over to December.
Yeah, well, Coach, really appreciate you taking the time to come up here and join us, break down these 2 games happening on Friday this week. The 4A game will be at 11 on Friday, and the 6A game will be at 7 p.m. on Friday, and that will close out the Super 7, and should be a really fun week. And so we appreciate you coming and joining us, Coach, and look forward to getting things started. Next thing you know, it'll be spring training, and we'll be kicking off 2023 before you know it. So appreciate you coming up here, and look forward to having a good week down at the Super 7. We're going to take a break. When we come back, we will break down 1A and 2A right here with Coach Alan Heath. So stay tuned for more right here on Average Joe Sports Talk.
The legend, Alan Heath.
Welcome back in. Road to the Blue Map, Super 7 edition, breaking down all the 2022 AHSAA State Championship matchups going on at Jordan-Hare. I want to thank Watkins Heating and Cooling LLC, as well as Cody Patterson Insurance, XL, and Buffalo Wild Wings for their sponsorships, allowing us to be here each of the last 5 weeks to break down all of the playoff matchups and get you geared up for this week. We're now joined by Coach Alan Heath, head coach at Sandrock. And Coach, we're going to get going here now, breaking down the matchups. And we're going to start with 2A. And a big one up here around Northeast Alabama. The Fife Red Devils back in the 2A state championship.
No surprise there.
And they're going to be taking on BB Comer, which maybe is a surprise to a lot of people around the state.
Well, but if you look back over since Coach Fawcett's been there, they started I think at 2-8 or 3-7, and they've worked their way up to being in the state championship game now in 5 years I think. Mm-hmm. And I'll tell you this about Coach Fawcett: when he was at Childersburg was when I was on staff at Montford, and I was there for 3 years with Coach Wagner. And Wagner was there, I think, 5 years. But I was there with 3 of those years, and we had some good seasons. We averaged like 10 wins a season. There's only one game that sticks out in my mind where we lost to a team that we should have beat, and it was an Adam Fawcett coached Childersburg team. And he does a really good job of getting those kids ready and motivated. Now, I mean, I'll be honest with you. When you look at this, yeah, Fife has the edge. They've been there every year for forever. You know what I mean? And that gives them an edge, absolutely, because that experience is going to give you an edge. I mean, but I'll say this though. I mean, if what I'm hearing is they may have some injuries and stuff like that are affecting them, they still have the edge. But I'm not going to discount an Adam Fawcett coach BB Comer team. And I've watched just a little bit of film on them. When I talked to Bo and I realized I was going to be coming on what we're going to be talking about, I didn't get to see whole games right now. Basically just watch highlight clips of them. They got some dogs. They got some good-looking ball players. I mean, and Talladega County is rich with good football players. They really are. Now, I've coached in Talladega County. They've got some really good football players all over that county. And, the big key for Comer is going to be, can they get out of that starstruck overplaying Fife? And that's tough to do, having coached against Fife this year. I promise you, that's tough to do, to get the kids to realize, I told my players, let me tell you guys, it didn't work. So I may not, don't take this advice, but I told my players, look guys, their feet stink and their farts stink, just like yours do. I said, I don't know if any one of their players.
I love it.
But I guarantee you that's the case, okay? And, so, I mean.
That's Alan Heathism 101, right?
Sorry. But my point there is, though, that when you can get kids to see past the fact that, Fife, it's kind of like, it's always been when teams seem to play Alabama. They're kind of starstruck. Oh, we're playing the Crimson Tide. That's the way kids look at Fife, and you can never get them past that. Like Geraldine did last year. Get past that and just, hey, we're gonna play football game. And I think Coach Fawcett may be the man to be able to do that. And I'm saying once again, yes, Fife has the edge. They've got the experience. They've been there. Coach Benefield's how many state championships he's won. Great football coach. And so, yes, they do have the advantage. But I think that, don't be surprised if this is not more of a ball game than a lot of people think. And, I was looking at some of the stats. I mean, they got a dang 5'5", 125. Tell me he's a safety, right?
He's a safety,
That's what I was thinking. 103 tackles. I mean, he's 5'5", 125. If you can motivate kids like that to play at that level, and look, they were not. They lost to
He's a sophomores, too.
Yeah, they lost to Dadeville, who was 10-0, 3A team in the regular season. Now they lost, second round, I think? And lost to Sachs, who's always good. I mean, I know Sachs had a damn year for Sachs.
3A last year.
Yeah, but Sachs, but they're still Sachs. I mean, you know what I'm saying? I coached Alexander for a long time. I know what they got at Sachs. I know what, Clint does there. I mean, they got really good, not Clint, Jonathan. I was thinking Smith.
Jonathan Miller.
Yeah, Jonathan Miller's there, but it's a long time since Clint was there. He's in Jacksonville now. But anyway, I mean, I know what they do there, what the kind of athletes they've got. So, like I said, now don't get me wrong, 5's 5. They hung 70 on us. One of the most embarrassing nights of my life. I mean, no, seriously, like, I want to go crawl under a rock somewhere, And there weren't any rocks, but we're in sand rock. I couldn't find a rock big enough to crawl under there, So, I mean, it was, they're still Fife, and they're going to be Fife whether they got injuries or not, because they took out the offensive lineman, they got the defense that's just smothering, and they're going to do what they do, and they're going to do a great job of it. I know I'm just running my mouth.
No, keep going. I love it.
But I'm like I said, I would not, after watching just a little bit of Comer on film, they got some dogs. They got some athletes.
Well, and it starts with the running back, Kamori-Harris.
Yes,
I mean,
that's
that
what.
dude's a load. Man.
Yes, he got nearly 1,500 yards. You know, I mean, averaging 9 yards a carry.
Yeah.
I mean, dang, that's tough right there. I mean, and even like I'll say this, right? Whether it's what's the Anderson boy or not for 5, their trap hits so quick. I mean, they execute as well. But once again, you know, just from what I've seen, don't be surprised if Comer doesn't give them a better game. You know, if I was putting money on, I'd put money on 5. But don't be surprised if Comer don't give them a better game than a lot of people are expecting. I really expect that to be a ball game. And you know, and like I said, especially if the things I've heard about injuries. No, once again, like I said, don't get me wrong. Yeah, if you put money on it, yeah, you know where you put it. But like I said, don't count Comer out 100%.
What was the statement about crawling under a rock or sand rock? That was.
Well, look, I'm at a school college that's got rock in the name, and I couldn't find a rock big enough I could crawl under. You know, and then Shannon Fagan does a great job in church. I won't go into the whole thing, but he does the WEIS stuff.
Yeah. Wise radio.
And he had to come interview me after that game, and I'm like, Shannon, what are you going to ask me about this? I mean, you know. Anyway, I won't go into my stories on all that. I'm on live right now, like nobody's censoring me, so I don't need to do that. But anyway, you know, it's. You can't say enough about what Coach Benefield does.
Dude,
what 5 is.
Coach Heath's already delivered.
I'll shut up now. I better shut up.
We're all.
Bo, you went down today. You visited Coach Fawcett at BB Comer. Obviously, you've done a show with Coach Benefield for a lot of years and have developed a good relationship with him. I know both of them really well. They're 2 great coaches, 2 great minds, and they've done it in different ways, I think, at both places. You know, Coach Benefield, it took some years there at Fife. He found something that worked with his offense. You know, with Coach Fawcett, it come in, it really took him changing the culture, getting Comer back to a winning mindset. When you went in and talked with him today and you were around that program, what was kind of the vibe that you were getting from them as they prepare for this game on Thursday?
It's kind of hard to explain. And I asked him what their vibe was when I'm not around, and he said the players are loose and confident, not in a trash talking manner, because they don't do that. He don't allow that. This is a different setup than we had when they played Reeltown, when there was plenty of bulletin board material. These guys are actually real humble. He talked about the importance of this for the city of Sylacauga, the school district, and those families that live there, and it has let their kids go to school there, how important that was. When I first met Adam Fawcett, first meeting I ever met, I walked in the locker room, and he's holding a broom, and he's talking to his kids in his locker room. This was a summer workout. He's talking to his kids in his locker room about why Jesus Christ would not allow this locker room to look like this. When everybody else would leave, he said Jesus Christ would stay in here and he would clean this locker room because he had a servant's heart. And he talked to his kids about having a servant's heart. And I was with Namath Pitts that day, and I looked at Namath and I said, whatever this guy's selling, I'm in.
Yeah.
Because he was not lying. And I said, this is going to pay off long term for these kids. They don't even realize it. And then I went to watch them work out after, and I was like, well, they're cooking with grease with this guy as their head coach. Something special's brewing here. And last year, a la Coosa Christian, we talked about this is a team to watch out for. Last year, we were a year early on both teams. This year, we've delivered with our promise with those both teams. Now, in the locker room today, it was his defensive coordinator, his offensive coordinator, and his stat guy who motions in. He's kind of like his guy that does everything else for the coaching staff. And it was us 4 in there. They was loose, but they wasn't stupid. They were studying. They were not arrogant at all. They were real calm, real collective. They respect Benefield. They respect everything Fife does. They know they've been there. They know they've done that. But also at the same time, they know what they've done to get to this point. And they know that last week they beat a very good football team that half the state picked to beat them, if not more than half the state. And they beat them. They were beating them 35-0 at one point.
Yep.
So I'm going to dive into their team real quick and we kick this thing over to Reggie and move on. Listen to this now. Last week they were up 35-0 on Highland Home in a game that I think was a 1-point line or a 2-point line. All right. They ended up ultimately winning 45-15. They're 12-2 in the year, which Coach Heath hit on. They lost to defending semifinalist Sachs in 3A. And then Dadeville, who you've seen, who without question has the best athletes in 3A, in my opinion. In 3A, they had the best athletes across the board. They're averaging 35.9 points per game. Adam Fawcett is as advertised. Christian first, family second, football team third in that order. But that's also why his football team's good, because those other two has a great foundation that leaks over into that football team. All right, ready for this? Richard Weed, pre-mentioned guy you have. We're going to start on the defensive side. Richard Weed's his name. He is a sophomore. He is 5'5". He weighs 123 pounds. He has 103 tackles on the year and 5 INTs.
You gotta love a kid like that. I mean, how can you not love a kid like that?
We're talking 5'5",
Yeah.
120 pounds. He has 103 tackles and 5 INTs on the year.
Yeah.
Cracking skulls.
You gotta love that.
He told me a story about him in 8th grade when Christian Story was a senior. And he said Christian Story broke out on him. He said he was the first one to arrive. And he said for the next 10 yards, it was a fight. And then finally Christian Story took him and just, he said he finally was like, okay, dude. Woo. No picks, okay. And he chunks him finally. But he said he still, at the time, Christian Story was Mr. Football.
Yeah.
And you got an 8th grader just fighting him like a chihuahua down the field for 10 yards before he finally threw him. All right. You mentioned this, Mr. Harris. Aforementioned best. He may be as good on defense as he is on offense, but he don't play long on defense, because when they get up on these teams, he comes out. He has 75 tackles, 11 of them for loss. Kamor Harris is his name. On offense, 158 carries, 1,480 yards, 17 touchdowns. The other dog, Devin Harvey, the quarterback. Listen to this: 96 carries, 678 yards on the ground. Through the air, he is 1,113 yards and 15 touchdowns. He's a dog on defense as well. He has around 45 tackles on defense. Again, he don't play a lot. Guess what? Both of those guys are juniors. Both of those guys will be back next year for this team.
That's huge.
Now, I'm going to kick this thing over to Reggie and we can keep it rolling.
Yeah, Reggie, I mean, tell us about this 5 team. You finally got to see them this past Friday against Pisgah. Obviously, they go out and they just dominate that game. A huge touchdown right before halftime that put them up 20 and really kind of separated the ball game. But for them, now coming into this game, getting back to the state championship after a year off last year. Tell us about this group and what they're going to bring to this BB Comer team.
Well, one thing I will say, that score does not really reflect how close that game actually was. Fife got off to a little bit of a slow start, but once they got going, they got going. One of our sponsors, Cody Patterson, with Cody Patterson Insurance, he went to that game with me, and I kind of told him about Fife and what to expect from the fans and the team. And I said, Cody, they're not going to pass the ball much. I said, you may see 2 passes, 3 at the most. Their first 2 drives, they score off passing touchdowns. So I think they may have passed 4 or 5 times in the first half. So he said, hey, I thought they didn't pass much. I said, I guess he had a different game plan tonight, but that's the most you're probably going to see Fife pass the ball. Logan Anderson, he, like I said, they got off to a slow start, but he had a decent night for those guys last week. Brody Hicks came through as usual. Him and Logan are like a 1-2 punch. I mean, those 2 guys are just A1. You're not going to find a better duo than that. And then you got quarterback Blake Dobbins. He has done a fantastic job for Fife this season. The passes he was throwing, I should have knew something was up in warm-ups, because I'm like, they are really throwing a lot of passes in warm-ups, and you don't see that very often. And he threw some beautiful balls. So, people that say all Fife does is run the ball, which they do, they also have somewhat of a passing game. So do I think Benefield's going to come out with something a little different this week and try to throw BB Comer off? Possibly. I don't know. Coach Benefield's one of those guys, he's like Nick Saban. You never know what he's thinking and what he's going to do. And I'm going to tell you another person to watch out for, too, that ran the ball very well in the second half was 8th grader Ryder Gibson. I was when they told me he was an 8th grader, I said, "There's no way." I mean, the kid is fast and he runs the ball like he's a junior. You know?
Yeah, I saw him in person too.
Did you? He came in late in the game. He had 3 carries for 56 yards. So when he did touch the ball last week, he had several. His carries were pretty long. But one thing about Fife, like I said, they do score a lot of points. They're one of the highest scoring teams in the state. They've scored 655 points this season on offense, and on defense, probably the stingiest defense in the state. They have given up on average 6.7 points a game, and that's pretty legit. I mean, 6.7 points per game on the season. Their defense is giving up. I mean, it's insane. I know through 14 games, that's insane. So,
Coach, I'll put up 14.
I'm looking.
Yeah, I want to see how the junior high was doing against us. Because that's who was in there.
Oh man, Coach Heath. I'm so glad he's on with us tonight.
Oh, you ain't lying, dude.
Oh man. But yeah, I was happy to be back in Fife. We hadn't been up there all year. I did hear from the fans, like, hey, where have you guys been all year? But as you grow, sometimes you gotta go other places. But Fife is gonna be Fife.
Coach, I kind of want your thoughts on who has more pressure on them going into this game. Is it the team that has been there and kind of has built this expectation of winning every single year the way Fife has, or is it Comer where you have a community who's kind of starving for this and hasn't gotten to feel anything like this in a long, long time?
Well, it's going to be a weird answer, but definitely Fife has more pressure on them. But Fife has got such a machine going that they thrive under that pressure to the point that I don't know that that's a disadvantage. I mean, honestly, I don't. I mean, because yes, all the pressure is on them because Comer's a great story. They're a great story, and Coach Fossey does a great job. He's a great guy. That's a great story to look at. And yes, if they pull off what a lot of people say is impossible, and that's going to be news all over. It's going to be an awesome story. But really though, I don't think that affects Fife that much because they really, like I said, they're so used to winning. I'll tell you, when you know that you have a program where it needs to be, where they just expect to win, not just every game, but every rep, everything that they do. And I mean, that's, I've been fortunate enough to be at a couple of schools where we were able to achieve that type of buy-in. Now, I've not gotten there yet where I'm at. I'm hoping to get there at some point. But I'll never forget, when I was at Montford, we had some, we averaged 10 wins a season while we were there. And we lost a whole bunch of talent off of, and we were nowhere near Fife level of success, but we lost a whole bunch of talent off our semifinal team when we went 12-2. And then we come back to next year and I'm thinking, hey, if we can just be 5-5 this year, we're going that'll be good considering the talent we lost. We go out and play Bibb County, who played, I think, for the state championship in 5A the year before in a jamboree, and we beat the snot out of them, beat them bad. And I come back in the locker room, the kids are just putting their stuff up like it was nothing. I'm like, hey, are y'all excited? And I'll never forget C.J. Chapman, who's an all-state receiver for us. He goes, Coach, we're supposed to win. I was like, that's awesome. I mean, that's what you want. And so, but Fife's been in that mode for so long that I don't know that really the pressure isn't even anything that they think about because they're used to being under that pressure that they are the ones who are supposed to win every time, and that's what they thrive under. Now, like I said, that is the ultimate goal as a football coach. You want your program there. And Coach Benefield's the best I've ever seen at getting a high school football program to that level sustained for as long as he has. Now, like I heard talking about Coach Etheridge, he does a great job with that also. There's a lot of really good football coaches in the state of Alabama. But to sustain it the way that he has at a 2A, 3A level school, that's it's really, I can't think of a word, amazing. And so, I mean, that, like I said, that is their advantage. Whether the pressure's there or not, I don't know that affects them because they are so, I mean, they're used to playing 15 games every year.
Yeah, they expect it by now.
Exactly. You better play 15. I mean,
They're kind of at that level like everybody's looking at Alabama's football program.
Yeah, they lost two ball games. Alabama's lost 2 ball games by 4 points. It was a down year. God, they're horrible.
It was a down year for Fife.
Good Lord.
At 3A.
Yeah, I mean, really, yeah.
It should be a really, really fun matchup. I'm looking forward, real quick before we move on to 1A, I'm looking forward to this match. I'm looking forward to seeing B.B. Comer on this stage, taking on this Fife team. I think it's going to be a lot of fun.
I agree with that.
Moving on to 1A, Leroy, Pickens County. Unreal game between Pickens County and Coosa. look, I'm not going to lie. I saw the score at, what was it, 44-26, I think, at one time. And I just said, well, Coos is going to make it. And next thing I know, I'm seeing our post on Facebook, and there's a Hail Mary and all this stuff. And, Coach, Pickens County wins on a Hail Mary. Leroy comes back. They beat a team that had beaten them earlier in the season. But for me, I feel like Pickens County is the one that's coming off of way more emotion with this Hail Mary, with all that. How tough is that going to be for Coach Michael Williams and his group to try to get these guys back focused to go and play in just 6 days now with 1 day shorter having to play on Thursday?
Yeah, and that's the thing, once again, and don't get me wrong, they've got a heck of a football team. I've watched them on film some, and they got some like I said, they got some dogs, But that emotion, having, Leroy's been in this situation. I know that last year I think they had a down year, but they've been in this situation a whole lot, and their coach been there, 12 years, 10 years, something like that, been very successful. And I watched them, and I'll be honest with you, I think that actually that emotional last-second win may work against them a little bit because, it's almost like that exhausts you to be in that type of situation. Now, it may not. I may be completely wrong. But I'm just saying, a lot of times when you have an emotional win like that, it's almost, and I can't speak for their kids. I don't know them. But, you have to fight against it being like a situation where, well, we accomplished this. We made the state championship game like that. With that, everybody watched that on AL.com's on Yahoo News. I mean, you can watch that anywhere you want to, That's
right.
And so that's going to be tough for them, I think, to overcome. And it also is going to be tough is the defensive front that Leroy's got. They've got a dang defensive end and a nose that could play at any level in the state of Alabama and be dominant. I mean, and they're really good. I think it's number 15. I can't remember what the nose's number is, but I mean, I think he may just be a junior or something. But they're really good ball players, really good-looking kids, and I mean, and they look very disciplined. And like I said, I think it'll be a good ball game. I do. I think I'll be interested to see how Pickens County does recover from the emotion of that because that's tough to do. I mean, it really is when you have a big win or even a close. I'll go back to even we had a close loss last year to Spring Garden. They beat us by 1 point because I didn't kick a field goal. That's why it was on me that we lost that ball game. We had a great game plan. Kids executed, played really well. And God, our kids wanted to beat Spring Garden a long time, so we beat Spring Garden. They're a good football program, And that emotional, we lost it. So maybe if we'd have won it, it'd have been different. But it affected us in that week. Now, Cleveland probably beats us 9 times out of 10, but I don't think they beat us like they did if it weren't for that the drain of having that kind of emotional ball game. Well, I mean, hey, we had a really good gate. That was a positive of that game. But, I mean, it really, though, I mean, we lost by 1 point to a really good football team, And so that emotion, it's hard to come back from that. It's hard to get kids back up from that, whether they won. So that's awesome. So then maybe they'll be, and that's surely easier than a loss, but it's still tough because, it's kind of like you've expended that emotional energy. And hey, 10 games is a long season. 11 games is a long season. 12 games is a long season. 14, 15 games, that's a real long season.
Yeah.
So I'm interested to see how they can do that. But they're both very talented teams. I'm excited to see how they match up, how they play.
Bo, you got to see the game. Tell us about this Pickens County team and what kind of stood out to you watching Coach Michael Williams' group who, had his team playing for a state championship just a couple of years ago. This isn't going to be new for them. But, obviously a wild game, one where they were losing pretty handily at one point, and it really took a miracle comeback to come back and put themselves in this position. But what really stood out to you about this team and what they're capable of doing?
First thing that people may or may not know, Michael Williams played at Alabama and the New England Patriots. And let me tell you something, I met him before the game, and then after the game I went and shook his hand because he is first class. He was first class before we arrived. He was first class while we were there. He was first class after the game. Great human being. Everything that happens good for Pickens County, he deserves. He's the head man for the job, and from my understanding, he calls the plays. He is a great coach, great motivator, so I'm super happy for him and what he's done there. And one of the largest human beings I've ever met in my life.
He's a big old dude.
Oh my God. That dude is massive. Now, with that being said, that atmosphere there at Pickens County is one that I haven't been at in high school in a long time. Stadium's on a dead-end road with apartments behind it, with a bonfire going on the other side of it. Packed out stadium, very loud. Multiple Coosa kids was coming to the sidelines complaining they could not hear snap count for the first time all season because Pickens had a band that did not stop playing, period. Josh talked about Southside's advantage with the Jungle and their band, where they just play a note and just bang on drums during the offensive sets, and it causes chaos and false starts. Same thing here. Coosa Kids was like, they just come to John David like, I cannot hear you. I don't know what you're calling. So kudos to them for that atmosphere. Now, with that being said, and he talked about at one point in that game, Coosa was up 30-16 and walking the dogs in this game. Kudos for Michael Williams to keep his game guys engaged, because let me tell you why. They are a 4 and 5 wide team that likes to throw it all the way around the ballpark. And at halftime, Teddy Whitmire had turned them over 3 times, one of them for a pick 6. And he come out in the second half and went away from his game plan. He went away from 4 and 5 wides and brought in 2 tights, a la Cherokee County, and started running a wildcat the whole second half, which caused them to get back in the game and ultimately win it. Now, before I go into these stats, real quick, when we kick this thing over to Reggie, let me throw this at you. Jaden Burns, with 44 seconds on the clock, I believe, hits a 42-yarder to put Coosa up 2. So Coosa's kicking off with 39 seconds on the clock. They're kicking the ball off with a 2-point lead. They call a face mask on the kickoff. Gives them the ball up 15 yards, so they got it at the 40. So with 39.7 seconds on the clock, no timeouts. They go and score a touchdown.
That's huge.
Because they do not have a field goal kicker on their roster. Yeah. They don't kick field goals. So they had to put it in the end zone. They couldn't kick a field goal and beat them.
Wow.
They can't kick an extra point. And kudos to them, they were perfect on their extra points that night.
No, 2 point.
2 points.
2 point plays, yeah.
On the season, they were averaging 56% coming into it. They hit every extra point that night, every 2-point conversion. Now, let me throw these at you real quick. I'm kicking it to Reggie. DeMarcus Giles is their quarterback. Dynamic, can run it and throw it. 1,895 yards in the season, 22 touchdowns, but he will throw it to you. That scares me in this Leroy game, because what you mentioned, when you got a nose and a defensive end that is unblockable, and you got a guy with 17 interceptions, that's not a good recipe. Elijah Merriweather. That is the guy everybody all week on our inbox and on our Average Joe's page said, if Coosa wants to win, they got to stop Elijah Merriweather. He's 1,278 yards, 14 touchdowns on the year. Super duper dynamic guy. When you see him in person, he's better than advertised. Santonio Jones at receiver, 893 yards, 12 touchdowns on the year. In 31 playoff appearances all time, this team is 55-29, which is a dominant playoff record.
Yeah.
If they follow that up with this scary fact, they're 1-3 in the finals. All time. All time.
Going to be a really fun one to watch. Tell us about this Leroy team, Reggie. For Leroy, they had lost one game this year. It was to Milry, and they are able to go back. They're able to avenge that loss. They don't just avenge it; they dominated Milry. And Leroy just seems to be one of those teams that has found their footing and is really playing their best football at the right time this season.
I definitely agree. Leroy has been. Leroy has always been one of those teams that have. They're one of the blue bloods of high school football in Alabama. They've got 5 state championships and 23 region championships, which is a lot. They're one of those teams, like you said, they found their footing. Milry beat them pretty good in the regular season, and they come back and repay the favor when it counted. These are the games that count. What happens in the regular season, it matters, but if you want to, win a state championship, these are the games you have to win, and Leroy did that. Coach Jason Massey has been there for 10 years. They're making their 8th appearance in the finals, and this is the first time since 2017. So these guys have been there. They know what it's like. They know what it's like to be in this position. Last week, Braden Huebner, which is their quarterback, had 29 carries for 263 yards and 3 touchdowns, which is pretty dang impressive. And And one thing, and I talked about this earlier with another team, their offensive line played phenomenal last week against Mill Reed, and that was a key reason into why they were able to dominate Mill Reed this time and advance to the state championship game. One thing about Leroy, their defense is very stout. They are averaging, they're giving up on an average of 9.7 points a game. And I think that defense is going to be key in slowing down this Pickens County team this week in the state championship game.
Coach, we talked about it. Leroy lost to Mill Reed. They come back. They dominate them this past week. What does that tell you about the makeup of this team to fall to a team pretty handily during the regular season, that be your only loss, and then bounce back and be able to kind of dominate the way that they were able to this past week?
I mean, that just shows resilience and also improvement. I mean, your whole goal as a coach, no matter where you start the season at, is you want to see improvement throughout, not just throughout the season, throughout each ball game, throughout each practice. You're looking to see improvement, and they've shown improvement in that they, get beat pretty handily in the regular season by Mill Reed, and then come back and are able to overcome that and beat them pretty handily in the semifinals. And so, I mean, that, and once again, that shows a team that's been there before. Historically, they've got the history of having been there, and coach has been there before, coaching staff, I'm sure, who's been there before, and being able to overcome adversity, not have that. Football is a very people don't think of it as a mental game, but it is. It's very mental, very emotional, and it's your mindset is as much as anything else. I mean, whether the weight room is extremely important. Knowing your plays, execution, those are all very, very important, yes. But your mindset and your buy-in have to be there in order for you to be successful. And if you don't have that, you're not going to be. It doesn't matter if you have the best players in the state. If those kids are not bought in, if they're playing for themselves instead of their team, if they're playing for a college scholarship instead of trying to win ball games, if they're playing for selfish reasons, they're never going to be near as successful as they could be if they're all bought in as one team unit, playing for each other as brothers and loving each other. That's what makes a team successful. And you see that in a team like what you see happening at Leroy, where they're able to come back. Hey, they suffered I'm sure to them was an embarrassing loss to a great Mill Reed team. Don't get me wrong, but still to get beat that badly after having such a dominant season, and instead of falling into that pit of, well, man, we can't beat them. No, they come out and beat them pretty handily.
Beat them handily,
yeah. So I mean, that says a lot about their character and the makeup of their team and their buy-in. The teams where I've coached, where we've been successful, the kids bought into what we were doing. And if you couldn't get the kids to buy in, you're never going to be as successful as you ought to be. Yep. And you end up getting fired. I've been fired before it happened. And hey, have I done good in my audition? Because when I get fired, you're going to hire me to work with you.
Oh, yeah. This is a good audition right now.
I just want to make sure I've done all right in my audition. All right, so.
Coach, we really, really appreciate you taking the time to come up here and join us.
Joshua?
Break down these matchups coming up this week for the HSA Super 7. Or are you heading down to Auburn?
It really depends. I've had some, nothing major. I had some medical stuff I had to take care of. I've had to take some days, and I've never taken any day. I remember I've got 220 sick days, but I don't like to take days. If my kids are going to be there to work out, I want to be there to work out with them. So I haven't decided yet for sure. Will Watkins, one of my best friends in the world. I'd love to go down Wednesday night and watch them play. I really hadn't decided yet. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
If you do, I'm going to be there doing the post-game interviews, so hit me up.
All right. Well, I appreciate y'all. Thank y'all for having me. I always enjoy it. Always enjoy it.
Yep. When we come back, we will break down 3A and 5A to end things off right here on Road to the Blue Map Super 7 edition. Welcome back in, Road to the Blue Map, Super 7 edition, ending things off here, and we're going to talk about 3A now. Big time matchup coming up on Thursday, 11 o'clock. It'll kick things off Thursday. And, look, we basically saw a matchup similar to this last year, Piedmont versus a Montgomery private school team. And last year it was Montgomery Academy. This year it's St. James. Should be a really fun matchup, though, I think, with these two teams. Going to be kind of different styles. St. James is going to come out. They're going to throw the ball around. They've got a great quarterback. They've got some great receivers. For Piedmont, it's not that it's a one-man show, but it's a one-man just kind of carrying the load and just doing everything with Jack Hayes. And it's not out of necessarily necessity. It's not that there's not other players that can do it. But when you have a winner the way that Jack Hayes is, why wouldn't you put the ball in his hands? And obviously that's what Piedmont is going to try to do going into this game. The same way they did in the second half last year when they had the comeback win and beaten Montgomery Academy to win the 3A state championship.
I mean, it's hard to count out Piedmont as long as Jack Hayes is on that team. I heard some radio guys the other night saying, I'm sure there's going to be a lot of coaches in Class 3A at Piedmont High School on graduation day to make sure he's walking across that stage because he has been a thorn in everybody's side in 3A for the last 4 years. Last week was just another day in the office for Jack Hayes. He broke another record, surprise, surprise. He is now the all-time leading passer in the state of Alabama. He passed Jamarcus Russell on a 43-yard pass to Ishmael
Bethel.
I had it written down here. And that was in the first quarter. So he broke that record then, and I'm pretty sure he's got that game ball. I hope he does. But yeah, like I said, it was just another day at the office for Jack Hayes. Broke another record. Last week he was 12 for 16 with 259 yards. He accounted for 7 of Piedmont's 8 touchdowns in that game. Again, like you said, I mean, it's not a one-man show. He just takes over and leads the team, and that's why that's why you can't count Piedmont out. But he's also, got a great supporting cast around him. One of the leading receivers on that team is Thomas Probst, the son of former Hoover coach Russ Probst, and Ishmael Bethel. And leading rushers also for Piedmont is Dontavius Jordan and surprise, Jack Hayes. So, I mean, Piedmont's stacked. I think a lot of people counted them out when they lost to Cherokee County in the first game of the season and when they lost to Anniston. But I was able to see those guys play Anniston, and I knew, I was like, this Piedmont team is still good regardless. They played, their 2 losses was to 2 very elite teams, one that's still playing for a 4A state championship, and Anniston very well could have been in that 4A state championship game as well. So Piedmont is going to be a great game. I can't wait to see how they perform against St. James, and I think we're going to kick it over to Bo and let him talk about St. James.
Yeah, Bo, you look at this St. James team. Me and you talked about it after we saw Davil and Walter Wellborn that night. We kept saying, hey, Davil and St. James will meet, and then we'll find out about Davil. Obviously, that matchup never happened. St. James ended up taking on Thomasville. I think when you look at the score of that game, it's kind of it replicates what the score of a Davil and St. James game would have been. I think St. James being able to spread Davil out could have given them a lot of trouble. And St. James, when you look at it now overall, now that the season's done, they probably are the best team out of the South in 3A this season.
We've said all along we think Davil has the best athletes in 3A, and they probably do. But St. James have similar athletes, and they do what you're supposed to do with those athletes. I think that's the difference in why they're sitting in this position. And that's no disrespect to Davil's coaching staff. I just think that St. James, the way they use their athletes is at an elite level. Coach Jimmy Perry does a fantastic job there. And there's no mystery about this, is KJ Jackson. He is, and you and I talked about this earlier, he is as advertised. And these stats were through 11 games this year, right? And we're sitting here at 14 games right now. Through 11 games, Reggie. Mm-hmm. He was at 2,159 passing yards, 32 touchdowns to only 6 interceptions. Woo! That's through 11 games. He's a smaller guy. He's agile. He can get it done with his legs or his arm. And as you can see, he does not turn the ball over, which is the key. When you got athletes like they do, and you have to stop them play after play after play, it's a big difference. Mm-hmm. Now, Consigliere Harrison is their running back, 6 foot 195. He's got 1,246 yards and 13 touchdowns, again through 11 games. That's all the stats we could find on these guys. I'm just giving you averages and what we found that we could find. Now, here's what I know is a fact. Their 2 number 1 targets on the season, Ethan Beard and Ziggy Holloway. I don't know how many yards they ended up with, but they both are averaging 20 yards per catch. This is a very explosive team, but that's going to be countered by Coach James Blanchard and that vaulted Piedmont defense who's been there and done that year after year. That's all I got to say about that.
Should be a fun matchup. 5A will be at 7 o'clock on Thursday night. Ramsey, Charles Henderson. Me and you talked about it, Bo, and I think you'll agree, Reggie. Nobody could have told us that this would be the 5A matchup before the season. I don't think anybody guessed Ramsey and Charles Henderson would be the 2 teams playing for a state championship.
Well, Ramsey maybe. I was thinking Ramsey or Pleasant Grove coming out of north to south. I think everybody was looking at UMS Wright to come out of the south bracket.
Yeah, so I mean, looking at these 2 teams, Reggie, tell us about Charles Henderson. We saw them beat UMS Wright a couple of weeks ago. They cap it off with a big win over Faith this past week to get into the state championship game. Coach Quinn Hambright in 2 years has just done a phenomenal job now getting this program back to their first state championship in 9 years.
Right. Like you said, Quinn Hambright, he's in his 2nd year. Last year, I don't know if many people noticed, they went 2-7 last season, and now to be 12-1 playing for a state championship. If he's not 5A Coach of the Year, something's wrong. Their only loss this season was to a very good Beauregard team by 2 points. And it seems like something to click with this team during the season. They've just been on the tear. They have knocked off UMS Wright and Faith Academy in the last 2 weeks, and those are 2 teams I think people were looking for to be playing for the semifinals, and one of those 2 teams to be playing for the state championship this week. For Charles Henderson, Jawan Boyd has been a key for those guys. He had 3 touchdowns last week, 1 rushing, 1 receiving, and 1 scooping score. I think he's going to be key for them again this week. He's going to have another big game to lead them against a very talented Ramsey team.
You know, Bo, we've talked about this Ramsey team all year, and really when we saw a switch flip, it wasn't the first win over Pleasant Grove. It was actually a loss to Auburn. They lose by 21, but they played with Auburn in that game. They scored 21 points on a really good defense, and from that point forward, it seems like things kind of came easy for Ramsey at 5A, and they come back and they get another win over Pleasant Grove. It's hard to beat a good team twice. They were able to do that. They find themselves now playing for a 5A state championship, trying to get their 2nd state title in the last 6 years here at that school.
Funny stat, and it's funny you mentioned that because after that loss, they've been on an 8-game winning streak. During that winning streak, they're outscoring their opponents 44.1 to 11.5 during that 8-game winning streak since that Auburn loss. Their defensive coordinator went to Will Wagner and asked him in depth to sit down and got his phone number and talk to Will Wagner for hours about what did you see on our defense, how were you able to do what you did, and he learned from those mistakes. I also talked to Miles Holcomb at the gym yesterday morning. Miles Holcomb told me when we played Ramsey, we had a ton of yards on them, couldn't put it in the end zone. We were in the red zone 7 times, couldn't score. But guess what? Their defensive coordinator came to me and said, hey, how were y'all able to move that? What were y'all seeing that was doing this? Like, how did y'all? So he's learning on the fly and backs up Will's story with Miles' story. So it lets you know that a coach is humble enough to go to another offensive coach and say, what were y'all seeing? How did that happen? I love it.
Yeah.
And I also think that's why they're in the state game. Now, you said it. If you beat Darrell LeBeau and Pleasant Grove twice in the same season, you deserve to be in the state championship game.
No doubt.
Because you're sitting here looking at a team that's been to 3 straight state championship games in Darrell LeBeau and Pleasant Grove. Now, if you beat them both, kudos, you're here. And one of the reasons they're here is Cameron Keenan. Listen to this now. 1,744 yards on the season, 17 touchdowns to only 6 picks. Takes care of the football. Ashton Ashford. Say that 5 times fast. 5'8", 175. A little bit smaller, but I tell you what ain't small. These numbers I'm about to throw at you. On 209 carries, he's at 1,597 yards and 21 touchdowns. And we always talk about the trifecta. What do they have at wide receiver? Here's what they have at wide receiver. Jalen Jones, 1,246 yards and 15 touchdowns. You're getting it done at all three levels. It's just like a defense when you got a good secondary, a good linebacker, defensive line, same thing here. You're getting it done at all three levels. I'm going to say this right now, and you can take this for what it's worth. QB Reese on their defense, 137 tackles, 21 of those for loss. I do believe he's a four-star athlete who kind of brigades that Ramsey defense. They're battle-tested, man. Charles Henderson, no disrespect for them. They may win this game, but this Ramsey team's ready for them.
Yeah, no, I think Ramsey's very battle-tested going into this game. And fun fact, Cam Keenan is the brother of Tim Keenan. That's at Alabama right now. Just went there a couple years ago, and he's the one that got chop blocked in that game a couple years ago. And a lot of stuff came from. So
that was in the Pleasant Grove.
Yeah. So really, really big for Ramsey and really big for us here with Average Joe's. Pulling this off, 5 weeks of Road to the Blue Map in the books. And it's been a fun year. I've enjoyed it. Bo, you and Reggie were breaking down all the games from right here in Northeast Alabama on Monday nights. We obviously got to do Central Alabama and Birmingham on Thursdays, and then coming together, talking about all the playoff games over the last couple of weeks. It's been fun, and we're looking forward to a really, really big week down in Auburn at Jordan-Hare Stadium. But for Josh Abercrombie behind the camera, Reggie Davis, Bo Starkey, we appreciate all the coaches coming out here and joining us tonight as well. I'm Caleb Brooks. That'll do it for us here on Road